My brothers and sisters, why are human beings so easily led into war? Now, this is something of a rarity for me. I usually don't discuss things that are politically controversial or historically controversial. I usually talk about the spiritually controversial. By accident, of course, but nonetheless, it happens quite often. Now, why are we, human beings, so easily led into war? It has to do with the nature of the planet we find ourselves on. It is not difficult to see that throughout human history there has been this constant restlessness, us seeking an understanding, an experience of ourselves that we have not achieved yet, and to see the world so that we can spark this inspiration within. Now, throughout human history, many armies have recruited, many nations have recruited through the idea of you will get to see more things. You will go farther than your village, your town, your city, your state, your province. You will go farther than you ever have and see more of the world because there's more of it out there. We all know there's more out there and we want to experience it. And a lot of people throughout human history have experienced it through war, being deployed, joining an army and being deployed wherever your nation is at war. Now, going beyond that, many of us get wrapped up in the cultural ideal, the national spirit of our tribe, our village, our town, our state, our province, our country especially, our nation. We get wrapped up in the propaganda that a lot of the time holds the nation together. All the propaganda throughout human history has shown that a nation is effectively held together when the emotions of a populace are stirred. And emotions are stirred through pride. So, throughout human history, this idea of our nation being the best, our nation offering the most for the world and humanity, and other people should realize this, and perhaps we have to make them realize it. Perhaps we need to expand our borders so that every single person in the world can see how well we operate, how well we can conquer, and then how well we can operate. I'm not just speaking about America here. America is the last on the list. There are so many examples of these things. I'll give you some examples. Alexander the Great. His soldiers followed him because he was an enigmatic leader. He was on the front lines with them. He had the same danger that they had. He fought just as they fought. Yet he led them into victory after victory, even while fighting on the front lines. Even while being scarred and beaten by many foes, physically, not on the battlefield, but physically. He still continued forward without fear. Yet Alexander the Great's idea of why he was doing what he was doing was simply to conquer. He didn't say that exactly, but his claim to Persia was, okay, they attacked us. They attacked Greece, and then we're kind of a part of Greece, even though they don't really consider us Macedonians as Greek most of the time. But I rule over Greece, so I'm going to take heart, take my men, and attack Persia for what their fathers did to my fathers, and take their lands and rule Persia. Then he moved on. He went to Afghanistan, where he had even less reason to fight. He went into Afghanistan and wanted to conquer it just because it was there. And he only did so by killing almost every living thing there that would not join him. He was the only leader, the only commander to conquer Afghanistan. Everyone after was unable to conquer the populace there, which of course moved back in over time. But what's further, he eventually got to India, and he had absolutely no rights to India. There's no way that he could tell his soldiers, okay, this is why we're doing this. No, it was to bring them to glory, to bring himself to glory through his men. He was obsessed with glory, obsessed with himself, and had no rights to India, but he went and conquered and fought there. But he did not conquer all of India. Now let's move to another commander, another general, another leader that commanded in the field at the front lines some of the time. Caesar. Caesar had the idea of Rome in his heart, but he was obsessed with himself once again. He was obsessed with the idea of Alexander the Great. He cried, it is said, at the age of over 30, I believe, because when he was beneath a statue of Alexander the Great, because he realized that by his age, way before his age actually, Alexander the Great had conquered all of the known world at that time. He was obsessed with conquering, obsessed with war, and what he could do through it, what glory he could achieve through it. And a lot of commanders and generals throughout human history have shown themselves just to be interested in deploying their tactics, seeing how they work, and seeing what they could get as a result. Caesar was one of these men. And when the Roman political system didn't appease him, he didn't like the democracy they had or the republic they had. He just approved everything that the senators wouldn't. And eventually they killed him for it, because he had taken autocratic power. But what did the senators do after they killed Caesar? Because they claimed that he was trying to be an emperor, which he was, and he was trying to be an autocrat, which he was. They decided that the time for democracy in the republic was over. So they fought over being the emperor they had killed for being an emperor. They fought over that title. The different groups, different factionalism rose up, and they all wanted to fight for that position, which they had hated Caesar so much for. Napoleon Bonaparte. Let's move to Napoleon. Now, Napoleon was bullied as a child. This might seem weird me starting with this, but you see this trend in people like Hitler as well, and possibly Stalin, but Stalin was beaten by his father. But Napoleon was bullied as a child, and he always felt inadequate because of it. He was bullied because he was a Corsican, he was basically an Italian that was at a French school, a French military academy eventually, and they bullied him for his Corsican accent. And he always wanted to prove, other people wrong because he was bullied so much. So he became very good at war games, and then he finally achieved his recognition from his classmates. Then he moved on to be, of course, the Napoleon that we know. But while he would always inspire his troops with the ideas of the Republic, the ideas of crushing monarchy, destroying it, so that freedom can reign, what did he do? He made himself an emperor. Just like Caesar, but Caesar didn't make the same claims to wanting a republic or anything like that. Napoleon did, but he made himself emperor after defeating monarchs. An emperor is just the same as monarchs. He even made his family members princes. He established his own monarchy. So why did people follow Napoleon? When obviously his actions proved that whatever way he inspired them through the ideas of a republic, why did people follow him even after he claimed himself emperor and made a new monarchy from his family? Because there was a period of indecision in France. There was no inspiration. The people were not inspired. This has been a problem throughout human history. They were not inspired by their monarchy that looked down on them. They were not inspired by the idea of France ruled over by a monarchy, because the idea of France was just purely maintaining that monarchy. They were not inspired to view themselves as better than any other nation with other monarchies. But once they realized, hey, we can work towards a republic, the French Revolution, they started to see, okay, this is how we are actually better. We're making these political changes right now, and we need to spread our political changes and ideas of a republic throughout Europe and show that France is great because we started this revolution, and we want to spread that revolution. That nationalism boiled up in them, and so many hundreds of thousands of soldiers joined up. But Napoleon, even though he inspired troops through these ideas, he often spoke negatively about them, pessimistic about them. He often would state how easily men are led by such baubles. When he didn't say this to the men, but after he gave men awards, pinned them on their chests, then afterwards would say how easily they're led through things like this, and how easily they're led through this or that speech. He did not view them as equals to himself. He did not care about the ideas of a republic. He only wanted to see how far he could go, how well he could be a military leader. He wasn't even a commander at the front, because his artillery. His expertise was artillery, but he did develop some interesting military strategies, his plans with branches, the idea of a soldier carrying everything that he needs. But anyway, he wanted to see how much militarily he could do. If we move forward, let's come to the United States. Now, I'm just going to touch briefly on this because there's still a lot of strong feelings about things like this. Throughout human history, the general who either fights a guerrilla war, or attacks from the flank, or pins down the main force, the main defensive force in one area, so that that force is pinned, and then operating around their peripheries. These strategies work. The idea of massing large numbers of troops and attacking an enemy, if the enemy is anywhere near the military strength of those who are attacking them, will cost a large number of lives. Many men will be lost, and a lot of the time, the objective won't be achieved. So we find that the Prussian, the German idea of war, that they failed in World War I and World War II. Was that they tried to be the blunt force that just pounded through the enemy, and it cost them in the end. They were not tactically mobile. They were a blunt force. So whether you believe the United States should be in Afghanistan or Iraq, whether you believe that or not, we have to think about how our military is being deployed. Now, in the Gulf War, we actually were able to pin a large amount of Iraqi soldiers in Kuwait, and then use some great tactics to end it in, I don't know, what was it, a 100-hour war or something like that? In Iraq the second time, I'm not going to go into that, but it was a very quick war. It was easy. We were using blunt force tactics, however. And the only reason that they worked was because we were so much superior. Now, when we get to the current state of Afghanistan now, the idea that, well, the reality that we haven't secured Afghanistan completely, even after 11 years now, I think, we have been fighting a guerrilla force with the blunt force that Soviets used, the British used. We're trying to fight a conventional war with people who don't use conventional tactics. That's why we haven't secured the entire country. And every mountain is defensible. There's so many caves, it's impossible to find them all. The only way Alexander the Great conquered Afghanistan was he killed every living thing. But we can't do that. We shouldn't do that. We want to conquer the people so they can become like us, but our tactics of bombing villages and spreading terror in a way, instead of, and a lot of people are going to hate me for saying this, instead of starting meal programs, starting more, there is a lot of rebuilding, but more rebuilding, trying to coerce the local populace with the carrot instead of the stick. But it seems like the American military has decided on the stick. It's not just about the United States of America, though. Human beings, nations, once they get to a certain level of power, they tend to become cocky. And they tend to stop trying to be militaristically smart and start to revert to the primal instinct to punch through your enemy, to face them head on, to amass your forces and attack. Sometimes one point after another, though now we hit more than one point, but just bludgeon through them. And this has failed throughout human history. You will always encounter a force eventually that will fight you in a guerrilla way. We'll start to realize, hey, we don't have to amass our forces like they do. We can do more damage by hiding, hit and run tactics. And we still haven't developed military tactics that can completely negate guerrilla warfare. It will be impossible for decades, if not hundreds of years, to do that, even with the rate of technology that we're developing. We must think about war in this way, but how are soldiers, let's not even go to soldiers, how are people led? In closing in this rather militaristic discussion, I didn't mean it to be that way, but I got to get my military knowledge out there some. I mean, I don't have a whole lot, but I've been studying, generals and commanders for quite a while. Doesn't mean I have actual experience. It just means I'm an armchair historian. Let's put it that way. Just an armchair historian. So, we've already talked about the idea of seeing new things, the idea of glory, the pride of one's nation. The reason why we keep on going back to these things throughout human history, and this keeps on being a problem, is that this world has a certain vibration. It has a certain level of consciousness, generally. We are in an ascending cycle, but we're still Rajasic. What does Rajasic mean? It's the Indian slash Hindu word for restlessness. We're always seeking to satisfy desire, always seeking to make things come together for us, make things come to fruition through outward action. And in war, it isn't about just going to battle. It isn't about fighting for the sake of fighting. When nations go to war, they want to make a more perfect peace that leans in their favor. They want to make a reality happen through war that creates a favorable reality for their populace, whatever that might be, or a greater defense, a greater security for their populace. This is the same wanting that we are encountering on an individual level. This is a world which its restlessness rules it, and animals and plants as well. Growing, but for what purpose? There are other worlds out there that are sattvic, pure, who are content and look inward and act outwardly, but only from a place of inner contentment. Just the beings in general. Of course, sentient beings mainly, but just even animal and plant life. But in this universe and other universes as well. There are galaxies and worlds in this universe that are tamasic, which are completely dark, either lethargic or completely selfish and greedy, or trying to constantly gain something for oneself without allying with anything. We are somewhere in between. This world is Rajasic, it's restless, and we are a part of that restlessness. That's what humanity seems to have been throughout military history, throughout all of history. There's this constant restlessness and not reasoning things out as to why we do this, why we do that. And even certain philosophies have not succeeded in truly breaking down why they're even philosophizing. I always forget if that's a word. Forgive me if it isn't, but regardless. Try to see this within yourself. What is this guiding force within you that makes you think that acting outward will create a certain inner harmony? And, it depends on what it is. It's not like all action outward is bad. It's just try to ask yourself why you do what you do and bring it back to the root of the problem you're trying to solve. Why are you restless? Why is humanity restless? We have to ask these things. And how are we so easily led into war? Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see all of you on my channel in the future.